All right, so this is Todd Atkins, and I'm here with Mike Davis from the Lights Out podcast. You can find his podcast on Lights Out Podcast on YouTube, and we're back with another MMA Conspiracy Hour. And today we're gonna kind of go deeper into the discussion of YouTube influencers and information. And Mike, I wanted to ask you a question about how you feel about the YouTube influencer community when it comes to putting out information to fans that use in YouTube.
Well, for the most part, most YouTubers don't have like an insight. Like it's not like they're a part of any strategy conversations or rehabilitation of character. They're not involved with any of that. And they're essentially somebody that sits in front of a camera that understands algorithms and buy rates through Google, and they purchase their views, and they just try to make a salacious headline with a neat little thumbnail or clickbait type stuff. But in regards to like actual substance, there's very very little that they can supply to actual like events taking place. It's like there's no, they're not real journalists. They're just personalities on YouTube. They're just marketing themselves, and they have nothing to do with actual substance. I mean, that's the truth of the
Now, what do you think about how impactful this is when they're talking about the James Krause case, and they're just it's almost like he's guilty until proven innocent among most of these YouTube influencers.
matter. Well, when you know nothing about the situation and you know even less about the law, but you really crave public attention, you will go to great lengths to make sure that you get it. And oftentimes they source each other as their information that they're receiving, and all they're doing is like it's almost like a game of tag, and it's like they're trying to run further than the other person or further away from the other person while getting the most clickbaits. With James Krause, every single thing that's taken place up until this time is pretty standard. um, my belief in regards to it, like James Krause, I'm only speaking of him. When you're dealing with the United States government, especially on a federal level, I've had several cases go down that road. Um, you never try to fight them. They're brutal and they always get a guilty. It's just like what you're guilty of and what they try to get you to plead to. And the carrot they're dangling in front of your face could be very different than what the headlines that you're reading are. So, in regards to like turning the heat up on somebody's life and trying to make them miserable, especially when they're at their lowest or at a low point, I just think that's kind of like a bottom feeding type scenario, and I generally don't participate in. Now, have I? Yeah, I mean, I've made nasty comments to people online or snide comments to people online, but having matured and gone through some things, I've kind of understood that it's probably not the right thing to do. And like these influencers that are doing that, man, I really hope that one day they're not in the same position as James Krause, because that feeding frenzy that's on him right now is mostly bullshit and bogus, but it's not a good place to be, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Now, explain to people, because I know Jesse Merl, Jesse on Fire, touched on this whole raid thing and how he tried to say he's still right in regards to that. Explain to people what the difference is between someone who's cooperating with investigation and someone who's actually raided by the FBI.
Okay, so let me just kind of set the table a little bit. He made a video saying that James Krause was raided by the FBI, correct? Okay, is
Yes.
that a yes, Ted?
Yes.
Okay. The reality of the situation is, and I corrected him, is that when somebody turns over their devices and allows access to their Discord, turning everything over, they're complicit with an investigation. So we explained that in a video, and Jesse Merl, Jesse on Fire, whatever you know name he goes by, he made a second video doubling down on it. Am I off on that, or am I correct?
No, you're correct.
And he sent you a bunch of nasty messages in regards to that of
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Have you ever dealt with somebody that wasn't really smart, but they would, first words out of their mouth was they would tell you that That's what they are. They're really smart. They're not stupid. I'm not stupid, right? 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 It's like trying to convince somebody that's dumb that what they're saying is foolish. It's an errand I don't wish on anybody, because I'm not going to try to convince anybody who's clearly a little fundamentally slow that what they're saying is just that. So if I turn everything over to the police, I'm being complicit. I'm allowing the investigation to take its proper course. I am all on board with, hey man, here's my open book. Whatever it is I got going on that you may or may not know about, you're about to see everything. A raid requires exigent circumstances of destruction of evidence. There's a raid and then there's no-knock warrant. A raid is right before a no-knock warrant, but a no-knock warrant is like, to get something like that, it's just like, it's an emergency. We got to go now. A raid means that the person is not cooperative. They're evading you, and it's an emergency to gain access to every single thing that you want that they have. So for me to even have to put that definition down for a person tells you he's probably not a really good source of information. If I'm going to double down on something, it's going to be something I know. I think my first issue with him was when I had said on a podcast with yourself and Miguel Arate, Cain Velasquez at his bond hearing said that he would hurt the person again. And none of the news media covered that. And we were like one of the first people. Jesse on Fire publicly kind of went after us as a group in regards to it and said, to me personally, that I need to prove that he said that. Well, my proof was Mark Garagos' attorney said it on his own podcast. So all Jesse had to do was listen to his podcast, and that wasn't good enough. He needed a timestamp and an episode and when it happened. So I've got to do the work for a friggin' clown. I'm not going to do that. All you got to do is listen to his podcast, go through the liner notes or whatever, get the information yourself. It's not like I had inside information. I just repeated something that Cain's actual lawyer said, right? So yes. I can't, I'm not going to argue with an idiot. I don't know, bro. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're snorting Adderall in your mom and dad's basement and the police come to the door, but you got it all in your system, you're going to go, man, come walk around. Come look around. That's being compliant. But if you were to say, oh, I got a whole bunch of stuff still down there, and you're going, no, I don't think so. Go get a warrant and close the door. That constitutes a raid. So maybe he can kind of understand that logic a little bit better than, what I've kind of talked about up until this point.
Now, Jeff Molina was recently suspended. We haven't had a chance to talk about this. What do you think about that turn of events?
I know nothing about Jeff Molina, other than I know he's a Krause fighter, and that, the only thing I can tell you about is what I know about James and him turning everything over voluntarily. So on something like Molina, I can't comment on something like that, but anybody that's involved in the investigation is going to get suspended. It's just, or even put on hold by the UFC. That's just kind of standard practice. That's something that's going to happen. But I don't know anything about Minner, anything about Molina. I can't comment on because I don't have hard facts.
Now, the Nevada State Athletic Commission said they were going to have a hearing, I think maybe January 14th, to discuss this, which I think is interesting because they didn't have a hearing for Krause, obviously, or Minner. But does that mean anything to you with this? Because they're doing it to discuss the Molina thing. They categorized his suspension as uncategorized.
Okay, so now I'm guessing here. So I'm not stating this as fact. You're asking me for an opinion. My opinion is, if the UFC says, hey, we need a little bit of a break until everything clears up, that I understand. If Nevada is getting involved, it means that they have to hear the facts, whether they suspend him or not. So the UFC suspending him is completely separate than an athletic commission. You're talking about a private company, publicly traded company, or a a state athletic commission. So the UFC suspension may or may not hold up with Nevada. It depends on what it is that they're looking at. So that's certainly something I'm going to be watching. If they're streaming that live, I'll 100% be watching every minute of that.
Because apparently it was the Nevada State Athletic Commission that suspended Molina.
Oh, did they?
Yes. So they're going to say, okay, we're going to talk more about this on January 14th, and I guess release some details. I don't know.
Okay, then that's it. Yeah, I know nothing about that. I thought it was the UFC, but if you're saying it's Nevada, that's a different ballgame.
But what do you make of any of that? Do you think they'll have any real details, or?
If they're going to suspend somebody, they're going to have details. Their wording is what people need to pay attention to. Yeah, like whatever words that are said, I'd pay attention to every single one of them and not glass over it.
Because what I think is interesting is, obviously we know some things from what's been put out in the public, but the commission's going to have to, this is a little bit different, you know what I mean? Where they're going to put out their own information.
Well, I think it's going to be very telling. I would be listening to every single word coming out of their mouth, because if there's a federal investigation that coincides with an athletic commissioner hearing, obviously two separate entities, they're going to be walking a tightrope, because they can't interfere in an investigation. They can't tip the hand in an investigation, but they also have to act based on information that they have heard. So maybe it's to suspend, or maybe it's to lift the suspension. When any time an athlete gets suspended, they have the ability to have a hearing in regards to it. And anybody not exercising that right is accepting a lifetime suspension. So like you have to, or a possible lifetime suspension. Let me correct myself on that. So you actually have to have a hearing. So I'm curious as to if this is Molina requesting the hearing, or the athletic commission, like putting forth their hand saying, no, we're going to have a hearing. So I think how the meeting took place is also something that could be very telling as well.
Now, do you want to say anything about what you have coming up on the Lights Out podcast?
Well, we just closed out our year. We got Tim Sylvia coming up, Jay-Z Cavalcanti, and Marvin Eastman, in regards to people that we feature, their careers in a historical. Historically, we look at their careers and go through it with each other. We usually go a couple hours. Actually, really interesting, full of fun little facts and information. So we're just plugging forward. I think we're getting a Lions Den reunion together as well, for maybe like a Thursday broadcast.
All right, Mike. Well, I appreciate you taking time to explain a little bit more on the subject, and everybody.
Well, these are the facts. Like,
I'd
like to sit here and give you a bombshell, but all of the headlines that you're reading and people trying to like pretend like they're in the know, dude, they're clueless. And you should probably give them entertainment, by all means, go ahead. But actual facts and stuff like that, I'd pay them very little attention.
Yeah, and for people that are watching this is what we're trying to do with our, show, is to educate people from Mike's experience, Miguel's experience.
Yourself?
It's not for shock value or trying to get increased viewers or whatever. If that happens, so be it. But that's not what we're looking to do.
Absolutely. All right, Todd, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it, man.
I appreciate you taking time to do it. And everyone, check out the Lights Out podcast. Take care.